As with all knowledge, we may not be able to prove panentheism beyond all doubt, but with enough information, we can prove panentheism beyond all reasonable doubt. Continuing the narration, panentheism addressing monism and dualism. Monism would suggest the terms of abstraction are innate emergences of complex physicality. And I would say that the Genesis narrative from the Bible does indeed support that idea. The point at which God breathed into Adam his spirit as an innate emergence of complex physicality. Dualism would suggest the terms of abstraction or spirit are independent of the physical. And so with that, we have within an inherited classical theism a hard substance dualism, which negates all monist conceptions of reality. Vice versa. The new metaphysical perception suggests the simultaneous existence of the monistic and dualistic concepts exist as viable necessities emerging from the model of an open, non-Cartesian system powered by an internal closed Cartesian system. The debate then moves from which is correct, monism or dualism, to becoming why are both a necessity. The debate is initiated, examined, and primitively resolved in 3 volumes of this work. As stated by the text from Philosophy for Dummies, 1999, Monism from the perspective of contemporary philosophy. Monists are philosophers who believe that all of reality, and as I'm reading this, bear the concept of non-dualism in your mind. Everything that exists falls into one and only one basic category of being. There is, according to every form of mechanism, only one fundamental sort of substance in existence. Everything is therefore somehow a configuration of this one substance. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, the individual acting within God is monism, for within this new perception, everything can be reduced to the state of knowing, the whole of knowing. However, without the physical, the material, the universe, the abstractual takes on the verb state of passivity only, and thus loses its most irreplaceable characteristic, which gives it its own uniqueness, the ability to grow. Active action versus passive action. The new metaphysical perception incorporates the physical and the abstractual, or matter and spirit, as vital elements of its being, and as such incorporates both passive and active action simultaneously. Dualism from the perspective of contemporary philosophy. Dualists believe that there are 2 basic kinds of substance in existence, There are minds as well as bodies, mental properties as well as physical properties. There is spiritual stuff as well as material stuff. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, the individual acting within God is dualism, for within this new perception, multiplicity of the individual creates God, the whole singularity. Or more accurately, I would say, because it is known that creation didn't create the creator. So it would be more accurate to say that the individual realizes God within the whole and singularity. Interactionism or interactionism from the perspective of contemporary philosophy. Interactionism is the most common version of mind-body dualism. It is the metaphysical view that most people take for granted before they've ever been introduced to philosophical reasoning and speculation. The interactionist holds that minds and bodies exist as separate sorts of entities, and that they both can and do causally interact with each other. Some bodily events cause mental events, and some mental events cause bodily events. But from the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, interactivism is a part of the new metaphysical system. However, the new perception generates the understanding that the physical is only temporary and provides the sensory data mechanism by which the virgin consciousness becomes a completed entity in terms of physical sensory input. The physical being temporary, limited by the limits of time, matter, energy, interrelationships, in essence, is a limited existence in terms of physical existence, but becomes an eternal existence in terms of the abstractual existence, or the existence of spirit, or what religions call God. Epiphenomenalism. From the perspective of contemporary philosophy, on this philosophical view, the mind is an epiphenomenon, a byproduct of the body and its processes that itself plays no causal role to initiating any bodily events whatsoever. According to an epiphenomenalism, bodily events can indeed cause mental events, but the converse is never true. Mental events do not and cannot cause bodily events, all appearances to the contrary notwithstanding. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, the physical is an epiphenomenon, a byproduct of the whole of knowing, a byproduct of the singularity itself as itself. Man being created in the image of God, the physical reaches into being the epitome of sub-elements, and perhaps the whole of the physical as well, capable of providing a means by which abstraction moves, or spirit, from being virgin in terms of what the physical has to offer to being complete in terms of what the element of multiplicity associated with a particular element of physicality has to offer. Parallelism. from the perspective of contemporary philosophy, some few dualists have cut the causal cord more completely. They have denied not just that mental events could or cause physical events, but that physical events can cause mental events. Thus, highly unusual position maintains not only that no thoughts, decisions, or intentions cause bodily movements, but also that no physical injuries actually cause pain. They allow only that there is a harmony pre-established by God or concurrently maintained by divine power between the physical and the mental. The events involving these two different substances run in parallel, but never, on this view, interact. So I would think that in many ways, classical theism has inherited parallelism in so many different ways. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, such a view is totally conceivable, but not necessarily critical to the new metaphysical perception of the individual acting within God, rather than God being separate or outside of the universe. There is much room for debate regarding the perception of parallelism, but the new metaphysical perception is neither nullified by parallelism, nor is the new metaphysical perception supported by such a notion. Man is an animal from the perspective of contemporary philosophy. It's a simple set of contentions that first we evolutionarily arose from animals, and therefore we are animals. And I would say that that is a mistake, perhaps, that Darwin has made in his partial conclusions concerning the whole of reality. Matter gives rise to matter, dust to dust, ashes to ashes, and so on. If anything remotely like evolutionary biology is true, or Darwinism, we are nothing more than highly evolved biological life forms. And it seems more and more that scientists are beginning to realize this. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, we may have evolved into highly evolved, relatively speaking, biological life forms. And then again, we may not have evolved at all. The argument regarding our quote-unquote evolutionary history is not the point of metaphysics. The argument regarding our evolutionary history is an internal debate involving the science of biology, genetics, anthropology, chemistry, meteorology, astronomy, geology, paleontology, etc. Metaphysics is only concerned with the question regarding the existence of the physical and the abstract, the existence of knowing and unknowing, consciousness of the abstract and lack of consciousness of the abstract, monism and dualism, Cartesianism and non-Cartesianism. And now, with the introduction of this new metaphysical perception, the existence of Cartesianism located within and powering non-Cartesianism located beyond, From the point of perspective of the new metaphysical perception, man may be an animal, but does such a complex animal have the ability to develop units, entities of knowing unique to the whole of knowing? From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, the answer is most probably artificial intelligence. From the perspective of contemporary philosophy, a closely analogous argument to the man is an animal reasoning goes as follows. We are building more and more complex computers, some of which are now capable of learning, changing their own programming to response to changing information. We can clearly imagine a supercomputer in the future utilizing the ultimate in parallel processing along with the right sorts of sensors mimicking the human brain to such an extent that its behavior is indistinguishable from a highly intelligent human being with conscious experience. The computer will obviously be merely a physical entity. Therefore, because we exhibit all the same mental traits, we must be merely physical entities as well, or so it is concluded. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, until we find a means, establish an understanding regarding the metaphysical inner and intra relationships, as well as establishing an understanding regarding the passive and active dynamics existing between the physical and the abstract or spirit, we will remain confused by the issue of artificial intelligence. The two metaphysical positions we have presently established regarding the physical and the abstract leaves us in a precarious position as a species. Looking long term, we will inevitably either create a sensory data mechanism capable of acting as a mechanism for the virgin consciousness to develop into its own unique entity of the individual, or we will encounter such a sensory data mechanism, be it natural or artificial. Looking even further into the future, if we maintain our present rate of technological advancement, we will inevitably either create a sensory data mechanism capable of developing into a more advanced form of unique entity of the individual than ourselves, or we will encounter a sensory data mechanism more advanced than ourselves, be it natural or artificial. Presently, we are ill-equipped to philosophically rationalize why the individual is morally or ethically obligated to allow us to continue as a species rather than replace us as the apex of the intelligence pyramid. It is only the new metaphysical system being proposed which provides the model needed to argue the rationale which favors our personal species survival in face of such a development. As such, the new metaphysical system must be given serious consideration. If that is not to be allowed, then at the very least, we as a species need to develop a metaphysical system which will provide us with the rationale for such an brain chemistry argument. From the perspective of contemporary philosophy, the brain chemistry argument for materialism contends that our increasing knowledge of the brain and its functions leads us to treat mental conditions that had once been viewed as purely psychological as rather physiological states of the brain. We are making inroads year after year into the treatment of formerly recalcitrant psychological conditions by means of drugs and other physical therapies. If a person's mood, emotional disposition, and cognitive functions can be influenced by the amount of sleep that yet the food they eat, and whether their bodies are producing just the right amounts of various hormones and other chemicals, then the materialists conclude our minds themselves must be nothing more than electrochemical systems. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, it is neither the mind nor the functioning of the mind which the new metaphysical perception addresses, but rather it is the purity of abstraction, seamlessness, itself which becomes the issue. Imaginary numbers and the interrelationship between imaginary numbers and the physical is not a matter of the mind, but rather is a matter of abstractual understanding, which the brain has the ability to grasp. Consciousness and consciousness of the abstract, or a consciousness of God, consciousness of one's own consciousness, knowing of knowing, are what separate the monists and the dualists. Superfluidity argument from the perspective of contemporary philosophy. This argument alleges that dualism is explanatory superfluousness, or unneeded for a full intellectual explanation and understanding of the behavior of human beings. The argument continues on the contention that any explanatory theory that is superfluous or unneeded is to be rejected. It then concludes by rejecting dualism as false. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, it is not just human abstractualism which needs reconciliation with the physical, it is abstractualism itself, or God itself. The major paradoxes introduced over the last 2,500 years by Zeno, Aristotle, Copernicus, Leibniz, Kant, Hegel, Einstein, Russell, Heidegger, as well as many others, cannot be resolved through the understanding of physical monism, in spite of the fact that most of these paradoxes do not deal with human abstractual understanding, but rather deal with paradoxical conditions of the physical itself. It is therefore not just the dualistic understanding of human beings which needs to be explained, but also the dualistic characteristic of the physical itself that needs to be reconciled with the physical monism as well as with abstractual monism. It is only the third metaphysical system introduced, i.e., symbiotic panentheism, as a new metaphysical system by this work which addresses the inter and the intra relationship and dynamics of the physical, human behavior, abstraction, and apparent nothingness. Thus, both physical monism and abstractual monism become equally important to understanding the whole of reality with a capital R versus understanding the whole, the universe, reality. The mystery objection from the perspective of contemporary philosophy, the second negative argument presented by the materialist alleges that we cannot understand two things about dualism: the fundamental dualistic relation whereby one particular body and one particular mind together comprise one person. Dualistic interaction causation, how things so different as immaterial minds and material bodies could possibly interact, how mental things can cause physical effects and physical things cause mental effects. And what cannot be understood cannot be believed. Therefore, at the heart of dualism is a stubborn chunk of mystery that renders it ultimately, literally, incredible. Therefore, it must be rejected. From the perspective of the new metaphysical perception, the physical and the abstract exist. The physical provides the means by which virgin consciousness can become what it is, conscious of its being what it is. As such, the conscious of the individual physical being controls the physical being through the process of abstractual awareness of itself and what it perceives to be moral, ethical actions. The process is one where the abstract or spirit joins with the physical or matter sensory data mechanism through the means of the physical having evolved to the point of having gained the intimate or the innate capacity to grow awareness of awareness, or awareness of consciousness, awareness of the abstract, awareness of spirit. The process may appear to be one of monism, but the abstract is as distinct from the physical as is the expanse between neurons. Like neurons, there is no direct contact of the physical to the physical. And in here, I think of quantum mechanics. Unlike neurons, there is also no contact similar to the contact found existing between the physical two forms of energy, space or time. Such a lack of familiar contact between the spiritual or abstract or God and the physical is not to be unexpected, since the abstract, from the perspective of the new metaphysical model, is directly unique from the physical. The connection, however, remains regardless of the present-day science's ability to measure such a connection. The connection is on the edge of being created through complexity by science itself in the form of AI, via cloning, androids, supercomputers, etc. Philosophers, scientists, and theists do not understand how seamlessness can coexist with multiplicity, and as such are baffled by the concept regarding classification. It is the metaphysical system of Panentheism which provides philosophers with the means of resolving the ongoing debate and thus allowing philosophers with the means of leaving the old debates behind and initiating new exciting debates to occupy the minds of humans. I would prefer the word dialogue rather than debate. That is my preference. And so this concludes this part of the reading of Panentheism, addressing monism and dualism. To be continued.